For phase cancellation addition lesson to work, I think you would have to listen to it on speakers, stereo speakers, and be positioned in the middle between them. But I'm going to do a series of tests where, even if you're wearing headphones, you will be able to hear what's happening. Although I do recommend listening to this on, stereo speakers, since when listening on stereo speakers, your ears listen to both of them at the same time. So you're in the middle of the sound field, and with your left ear, you hear both of them. And with your right ear, you hear both of them. When you're wearing headphones, your left ear only hears the left channel and your right ear only hears the right channel. The best way to experience this would be with the speakers, but as I told you, I will, conduct a series of tests just to show you what I mean, by making everything mono and showing you what it sounds like. Even if you wear headphones, you'll be able to hear what I'm trying to show you in this lesson. Now, the first thing we'll be dealing with when, regarding phase cancellation or addition, we'll be dealing with the low frequencies. Now, one thing I'm going to do before everything else is to create a custom rack for myself in Ableton that's going to allow me to listen to my entire song in mono or whatever is actually soloed on any of the channels. So what do I need to do? I need a utility to play me only the left channel, and I need to group that utility. Okay, so that's only the left channel on both of them. So that's the left channel playing on both left and right. Now I need a copy of that. I'm going to duplicate that. And on this other one, I will need the right channel to play again. With this panning in the middle, now I have the left channel playing on both left and right, and the right channel playing on both left and right, effectively making my entire song mono. What is going to happen additionally on top of that is that everything is going to be twice as loud. So I'm going to pull these down. 6 dB each, both of these. So let's hear the difference. Now you can see how that makes a difference in the elements I have and the elements I can actually hear once I, convert my entire track to mono, actually adding left and right together and playing them on both of my channels. Now what actually happens there, aside of having both left and right on, left and right track on both left and the right speaker, is that anything that was, phase opposite on both left and right is actually going to disappear. And you can hear that the best on this clap. If you just listen to the drums, let's solo that out. You see how much that clap, the high frequencies of the clap, how much it actually disappears once it's being added. So it's quite stereo. That tells me that my clap is actually quite stereo and has quite a lot of, phase opposite frequencies that are going to disappear in mono conditions, meaning that my song played in a club where they have a monoed out system, which is in a lot of clubs, is going to produce some kind of problems in a sense that it's not going to sound the way I intended it to sound. And I really wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want my song to sound like this in a monoed out club. So I'm going to have to work on, finding solutions and, remedying some of those problems that occur. Now, this is not the low frequencies we're talking about here. We're talking about general problems about anything in the mix that actually disappears. But, it's quite nice, as you can see, to actually check your song in mono every time you play it. Okay, that's really nice. So you can, for yourself, to be able to check something like this, without third-party plugins or having, a special listening system, monitor controller or something like that. You can create a rack like this by yourself in Ableton, having two parallel chains just like that. Each one of them has the utility on it. And in that utility, we didn't change nothing except selecting which channel it's going to pass through. So only the left on one of those and only the right on the other. And then I just volume down by 6 dB on each one. And that's effectively my mono out rack. Now, I don't use this so often because I do have that controller in my studio. I have a controller where I can actually, mono out things and phase flip just like that on both. So I don't need to use it, but this is a really cool way, just having this and actually, let's say maybe even selecting it. So mono out rack like that. So I can plug it into any of my songs anytime I want to. You can also control this with a button on your keyboard. So let's say we want to, enable key mapping, and I select this, enable disable switch right there, and I select any button on my keyboard like this. So now that I have this rack set up and, the key mapped right here so that I can click something on my keyboard and just enable it, disable it, I can use that quite quickly from, whatever channel is selected. That thing is still going to react to my keyboard right there. So it doesn't matter if I'm looking at it or not. I can just, still press the same key on my keyboard and it's going to react to that key because it's mapped. Okay, now I'm going to keep it turned off. And let's try it out. Let's see, as we already did, what is going to disappear. So we saw that the clap disappears quite a lot because a lot of its information is stereo. So there is a way to remedy that. But what worries me even more is all of the bass stuff. What happens with my bass? What happens with my sub? So right now, I'm sure that my bass has no problems because I generated my sub with a single oscillator that produces a mono signature. Everything is mono, and all the lows of the other, so-called bass sounds actually extends into stereo, but that's only above a certain line, meaning that I will not have any problems when I switch into mono. Just like this. Let's try that out. Just those two, like this, and switch to the mono on and off like this. Okay, let's try that. So as you hear, that all sounds good. It doesn't change. Now, what could be the problem? Why am I checking this? So what I'm even more worried about is the phasing problems that we can catch with the bass, and let's say especially the sub bass. So if you just took a preset out of somewhere and that preset had some stereo information in it, once you monoed it out, any stereo information would be lost, meaning that the volume of that element would change. So if it had anything different on the left and right and you mono that out, that thing would disappear. That was different. It would just cancel each other out. So I'm going to emulate the worst possible, scenario where one phase is completely opposite from the other on this sub. So you can see how it actually disappears. So right now, when I play it in stereo, you can actually hear the sub. It sounds okay. If you are right in the middle of your speakers, you can actually maybe even see that there is an opposite phase bass element. You can actually hear it, but without even discerning if that's happening or not, without being, too careful about listening or whatever, we can actually play the song and then engage this mono out rack, which is going to make everything mono. Essentially, it's going to add the left and right together. Now, this sub having one of its elements in a completely opposite phase to the other, and because it was mono before, these two are completely identical, but in opposite phase, meaning they are going to produce zero signal. So let me show you that solo, and I'm going to mono it out. So you can even see that the signal is coming in, but nothing's coming out. And what's coming out is really, really quiet, meaning that I did have some stereo information in there, And this is what's coming through. Only the stereo information is coming through. What is left, everything that was completely opposite what I just made it completely disappear. So once the phases are completely opposite and you add them together, you get zero signal. This is not completely zero, since most obviously I did have some, stereo information before I flipped the phase on the sub. Now if I remove that, it doesn't make a difference if I mono it out or not, because it is mostly just mono. It is mostly just mono signal, so it means it's good. So if I play the entire track and I do that, mono out or mono not mono out, you can see also that this ride here is really stereo, so it completely disappears because I have this auto pan on. So it also makes it disappear once I switch into mono. And I don't really want that, so I'm gonna, lower the amount of what's happening. Okay, now that makes it better. Let's check this thing with the clap. I think it's this one. So the difference you're hearing every time, it turns mono is because I did this. And you're just not seeing the rack. So you will just hear everything turn mono and the sound really change. But I'm keeping the view on this channel so I can figure out what the problem is and how I can make it disappear. Okay, so what happens right here is that once I turn everything mono, a lot of the information out of this clap disappears. And I did bring up all of this info right here, but I'm thinking that now I'm just gonna do all of this in mid side. Okay, so this is the mid, this is the side information. I'm also gonna cut that off too, of course. The end, like right there. So I have different set of filters for the mid and side signals. And on the side, on the mid signal only, I'm gonna raise that high information I wanted. Now I'm gonna switch to mono this out. That's also cool. Let me see if I have any spread on. No, I didn't spread the sample any more than it already is. So I like the way it sounds. I like what I did with that. I think I'm just going to use the utility to make it less stereo. Just like this. Make it less wide. Now the difference is not that great, but what did happen is by making it more mono, I took out a lot of the stereo information. I'm guessing that this snare, clap, is actually way quieter than it actually was without that utility on. So let's check for that. Okay, so I remedied that with the gain setting. So now I have the whole thing redone. So I have this clap more mono than it was with a bit more gain so that, it compensates. So now when I make my entire track mono, the the clap should not actually disappear that much as it did before. So let's try that out. I'm also going to mono out everything and put it back in to see what the difference is now. It's at least a bit better than it was before. So now we fixed that a tiny bit. Let's see what else could be the problem. Okay, I like it. It sounds good enough. When it's monoed out, it's still going to be the same track. It's going to have the same groove. It does sound much better in stereo, of course, but still, once you add it all up, it's not going to lose the clap as much as it did. It's not going to lose the ride as much as it did. And the most important thing, it won't lose any of the sub. Now, I could also check between my drums, with the kick drum and the sub bass also not colliding, but that's not necessary since I do have a sidechain, compressor on the sub that pulls the sub down every time we have the kick drum. You can see it right there on the actual graph, right here on the histogram. So this is the gain reduction happening on the sub. Every time we have a kick drum, it pulls the sub down so we don't have any collision between those two. If I didn't have that, yeah, we get this problem where sometimes the sub plays with the kick, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it plays a different note with the kick, and thus changes the phase and how it's phasing. Actually, kick and bass, they collide with the phase of those two, and since we're changing the note, we actually change how they collide, so I couldn't really set it up statically so that they always sound good together, since I am changing the note. This means that probably the best solution, most commonly used in electronic dance music, is this sidechaining compressor that's going to remove any sub every time I do have a kick drum playing. So one more thing I need to do is check for these drums, because I still feel they drop out a bit more than I'd like once I switch into mono. So what I'm going to be doing again is going to be clicking this button on my keyboard and getting everything to mono out, and you will hear the difference in the sound. Okay, that's also cool. I think that the clap loses the most. So I'm going to switch this other clap also into MS, and I'm going to do this much wider. That sounds better already, I think. So, with that said, I like this. I'm just going to remove all the low frequencies also from the sides in this clap right here. This other one, okay, done. Everything cut. Okay, better. So I like that. I'm going to disable this mono out rack. So as you see, it would be a good practice if I started doing this mono out, listening to the song in mono while I was making the pattern. You can always check it after the fact and redo the things you need to redo, because in the end, I would have to repeat the same process I did right now. I would have to do it at the beginning. So it's not necessarily making more work for me since I'm doing it now and not before. What it is happening is that, some of the parts of these elements that is stereo is missing, so it doesn't sound as cool as it does when it's stereo. But that is exactly actually the problem, that is going to happen. So in the club where everything is monoed out, that's what's going to happen. You're going to lose some of the information. And most probably, everybody has a stereo in their car. Maybe on the phone, this would happen too, because it has one speaker. So for phones that have only one speaker for playing, and maybe other sound system that actually monos out your song. So it's a good thing to listen in mono, since you're going to be, avoiding any low frequencies, being canceled out. You're going to check out how your drums actually sound. Do they have enough punch? Do they still retain enough information in mono once you add those left and right channels together, and everything that was off phase, opposite phase, actually cancels out. So does it still sound good enough? Is it still, dynamic as much as you wanted it to be? So having this in mind is just one of the things that you need to take care of as a music producer, as an engineer. you need to be sure that your song sounds good in any conditions. This is why we always check it in mono, and usually all the elements that have enough punch, we usually try to keep that, beginning transient of the drums and everything else. We try to keep that mono too, because it gives us a better punch if it comes out the same time from both of the speakers. So there is no phase difference, at least in that beginning, in that transient of each one of those drums.